Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Okay, I gotta share one. Yeah, sorry. So,
Go pick your mic up.
yeah, we can record this little outtake. Meeting people at Google, and so there's always this, get to know the person. And so this guy tells me this story. He says he was at some event, and he had an orange, neighborhood event. And this little neighborhood girl, she's about 3, she's eyeing his orange, right? And he says, "Would you like my orange?" And he says, "Do you like oranges?" She gets this very serious face on. She says, "I don't know. I'm 3, and I don't know very much. And I'm confused all the time."
Wow.
I was like, oh, my God. That's such an old soul and 3-year-old. I was like, that's me, man. That's my life at work. I don't know very much, and I'm confused all the time.
I guess that's a great way to introduce things. This is the PowerShell Podcast. We have a very special episode in the flesh at PowerShell Summit. Don Jones, Jeffrey Snover, pillars of the community. A lot of the folks who I've had on the podcast over the years are, standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, and you two are some of the giants of the community. And you've kind of raised up your own fleet of giants. You've raised up a fleet of giants, and it's a pleasure to have you all on the podcast. And I think today I want to talk about sort of your shared mutual history with PowerShell and honestly where it takes us.
Is it a fleet of giants, or would it be a flock of giants?
I think it's a herd.
A herd.
A herd.
I heard it was
A gaggle?
Murder
giants?
not gaggle.
No.
A murder of giants, maybe.
Murder of giants.
Murder of giants, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
this
This is what happens. By the way,
very entertaining,
Don
not very
lied
formative.
in his talk.
What did he lie about?
He said, what did you say? I interrupted you.
No, it was
Conference thing.
It was
You said that
it was
you
about
got started
PowerShell.
from
Yeah,
when we started to ship.
PowerShell launched in Barcelona in 2006 at TechEd. I was involved prior to that.
Well, prior to that.
Well, yeah.
You had a very significant role prior to that. I remember, I don't even remember why I was in Vegas. I was in Vegas for something. I remember meeting you.
It was MMS.
Was it MMS?
Yeah.
And then, we both had the shoes on. Uh-huh. And then you told me, I remember you telling me, I write books fast.
I do.
and no matter what you think, this is going to take 10 years and all this. And it's like, this guy is pretty smart.
And it did.
I got to listen to this guy. So,
We got it done pretty quick, though. I mean, people adopted it faster than we thought.
Yeah. Worked well.
Yeah.
Well, because I listened to you.
Well, and everybody. I mean, the MVP group that kind of clustered around PowerShell in the very early days was really, I don't know, they weren't really evangelists. They were really critical. And that helps, especially when you're that early in and you're trying to figure out how are different types of people going to use this, because you're kind of guessing. And the only thing you could really look at was VB script, which was not a good pattern. And there was a lot of really good discussions. It was one of the neat things about being part of that group.
Yeah. So there's VB, but then also the Unix community.
Yeah.
And honestly, that didn't provide as much. I thought that the Windows community would morph into being very isomorphic to the Unix community, and that didn't.
No.
It took it on its own unique character.
It did.
Yeah.
Can we go back a little bit? And I want to say that a lot of this stuff is covered in Shell of an Idea. If you haven't checked out the book, if you're interested in the history of PowerShell and a lot of the stories in between what we're going to cover, a lot of the stuff Don talked about in his talks today, you got to check out Shell of an Idea. Highly
100%.
recommend.
Buy 3 copies because one of them might get destroyed.
Yeah, got to have a backup.
Yeah.
I've been seeing people
Might
signing
lose
books.
one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but let's go back to the early days. How did your paths cross? How did you decide that, okay, Don, you have a valuable perspective. Let me listen to it and use that to kind of direct things. When did those paths cross?
So it was that MMS, and then what? I think you were working for a company.
Sapien.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a couple of reasons. I mean, I had been writing about VB script, right? Like I hit a point in my career because I used to write about whatever book a publisher would pay me a $10,000 advance to write. And that doesn't happen anymore. Don't get excited. And so I would write like 6 tech books a year, and I was largely living on advances. But it wasn't taking me to like the next level where I needed to be at conferences and teaching classes because I wasn't known for a thing. I didn't have a shtick, a brand. And so I started looking around for one, and I had been mainly speaking and writing in the software dev space, and it was just full of people who were super well known. I'm like, I will never be able to get in there with a crowbar. And so I kind of turned to the admin space, which I also knew real well. And then there was the crossover. It was VB script, right? So I was writing about that a ton. And obviously, for the PowerShell team, that was their most obvious first audience to go after. Like, if we can flip those folks, that's a foothold. We're in the door. And I was working for Sapient Technologies at the time. They had bought scriptinganswers.com. And
that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they made PrimalScript, which was an integrated development environment that was really popular with VB scripters. And the team was like, if we can get that in PowerShell, because remember, there was no ISE back then.
Yes.
Like, you were coding in Notepad, or it was bring your own. And so the reason I went to the launch at TechEd in Barcelona was to demo PrimalScript's support for PowerShell. So the team could say, look, this isn't just us. Other people have bought into this as well. There's an ecosystem. There's tools if you want to get serious about it. Like, this is a safe bet to make. And yeah, I mean, that was really kind of the flame point.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't seen as just a shell, that there was, that there was a scripting environment, that we had rich debugging, like you don't debug bash scripts, and things like that. So I wanted to make having a great IDE support would be a huge proof point.
One thing I noticed that's kind of similar between you two is your storytelling ability, your ability to kind of see that narrative, whether that applies to your career and where it's going to go, or when it applies to kind of getting buy-in. But can you speak to, I know, Don, you've written a ton of books, so I guess I'll start with you, Jeffrey. Where does your understanding of storytelling, where did you realize that was important? How did you refine those skills?
Yeah, so in my talk today, I talked about how at some point when I was working at Tivoli, I had an engagement with my boss who made it clear that really my role was as a force multiplier. And I pointed out that when you get that in focus, that all of a sudden your palette of tools changes, right? And so in the past, it's just code. But when all of a sudden you say, hey, my job's to figure out how to get these 1,000 people all working better together or be more productive, you realize that, well, sometimes the answer is code. Sometimes it's a framework. Sometimes it's a library. But sometimes it's a story. And more often, it's a story. And I have to say, I get a lot of credit as being the inventor of PowerShell. And yes, I did invent a lot of the core concepts that you see in PowerShell. But the thing I'm most proud about is the fact that I created an environment, a story, that we were able to bring in superstars, and then they were able to add their creativity in a way that was coherent, right? So the language, Jim Truer, Bruce Payette, 100%. Well, okay, 95%, but they are the owners of that. Kenneth Hansen provided a ton of stuff around the namespace. Lee Holmes, oh my God, so many contributions, security, etc. But had they just come and added their stuff, you could just get an incoherent mess, right? Bill Gates used to say this all the time. Bill Gates would say, "Hey, we figured out how to find and hire the world's smartest people. We just haven't figured out how to get their IQs to add up." And so having a story helped provide a narrative so that people knew how to get their IQs to add up. That's the thing I'm proudest of.
And Don, I remember in the last time we talked, you had this takeaway of, writing a good fiction book and writing a good technical book are very similar, which to me, re-listening to it on the plane ride over here, it kind of hit a little bit different, and I've kind of realized the importance of storytelling. But for you and your journey, when did you start tying that in? Because I think that you are incredibly gifted at creating a story that people can buy into, get invested in. Along the way, you learn a ton of stuff, and you don't necessarily know that that's the whole goal. But can you speak to that?
Yeah, a little bit of persuading people, which is kind of what you said. And a lot of it is teaching, right? Like the typical engineer approach, like if you ask an engineer to sit down and write a book on programming, they're going to write the first chapter with a bullet list of every definition you need. And then they're going to explain a bunch of concepts. And it seems very efficient, right? I'm going to get all this stuff out of the way up front. But it's not how our brains work. It just isn't. We live from cause to effect to cause to effect to cause to effect, and that's what a story is, right? You went and did the thing, and then this happened, and so that you didn't like that hurt. So then you went and did this thing, and so one of the best ways you can teach someone is to understand where it is you're trying to get them, and you've got to be very, very scoped on that, and you cannot do all the things, and then figure out where they are, And then you create the straightest story you can from one place to another. And you're going to have to walk them through some failures because that's how our brains learn, is with failure. And I've tried the thing. So, good example, the first published PowerShell book ever I wrote, PowerShell TFM, right? And because we were writing for a VB script audience, it reads a lot like a VB script book. By chapter 3, we've got if then, we've got for, right? We've got all the constructs. As more people started migrating into PowerShell and picking it up who did not have a VB script background, that was not a good story for them. Because they're like, wait a minute, why am I supposed to be a software engineer all of a sudden? When did I sign up for that? And so people started asking me, is there another book you recommend? And I bought them all. And nope, that one's nope. Chapter 3's program, nope, program. Because they'd all basically just copied my outline from the TFM. And so I sat down and said, okay, there needs to be a new approach. I'd been teaching a lot, so I knew where people got stuck. And so then you craft the story. And the story's never complete at first, right? It goes on forever. I can only get you from point A to point B. And so you skip some stuff. And that's like the key part of it, is you got to keep it a concise story. I'm not going to teach you everything about the for each object, I'm not going to go on all that. We're going to this much of it, and then I'll come back later with some more.
Fill in the details later.
Yeah, that's just how people learn. And once you start to figure that out, and you're doing that story, especially when it's live, like I cannot stress how important teaching someone live is to developing your story, because you can see their eyes glazing over, or you can see them engage, or you can, like, that body language is so important, and you get it nowhere else. And once you've got, and you never get the story right the first time, right? Like, there's stuff I'm like, no, I've got to teach them this. Turns out it's not fitting the story really well. But I mean, I would say probably from some of the first books, the first book I ever wrote was called Microsoft.NET E-Commerce Bible. And I just finished at craftopia.com. I just got laid off. And that book was a story about craftopia.com. It was everything we did wrong and how we got there and how we got past it and what we did. And that's the story. It's the failures. It's the ugly bit. It's not just regurgitating a bunch of facts, right? There's context. There's the world is in there.
Like choosing a terrible name.
Oh,
sounds very close to craptopia.com.
Yeah, well,
it's like, you said what?
We sold arts and crafts to grandmas and ma's.
There you go.
Craftopia. And it redirects to Home Shopping Network now, because that's who bought us for 10 cents on the dollar.
Oh, man. So, I like to tell people when they ask about, learn how to do speaking, that the key is to pick a talk and then give it over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? So do it at places where it's not going to be recorded, because it's recorded, people will just go to that. And the point of this is that the first time you give that talk, right, it's going to be terrible. And then the fifth time you get it, it's actually going to be pretty good. But you're still going to be focusing in on the content of your talk. But there's going to be some number of these things where all of a sudden you know the content of the talk and you can almost just say it without even looking at the slides. But then you keep giving the talk, and then you shift your focus from the content to the delivery of the content. Yep. And you say something and you look at the audience like, okay, that didn't work. Okay. Oh, that worked. Hey, is there a way to say that even higher, right? And then you learn some techniques like varying the pace or the tone of your voice, the importance of silence.
Hallmark.
The importance of repetition. Just there's a number of techniques that you have to learn in order to tell that story. But if you're always giving new talks, you're focused in on the content and not your ability as a storyteller. So it really is key. You have one talk and you just give it a gazillion times.
Yeah, and if you've ever watched a Netflix comedy special, one of the stand-up comics, you see these really amazing comedians, this really polished delivery, and they have their wry voice at exactly the right moment, and they pause for laughter at the right moment, because they've been doing that in 10-minute chunks in comedy clubs for a year before that. And then they took the thing on the road, and they know exactly where people are going to laugh. And then on the last one of their touring shows is when they film the Netflix special.
Yeah, what I've found, my observations on speaking, and it actually comes from stand-up comedy, is that the tension that exists in the room, especially in a tech conference, things are very tense. Everyone's sitting there appropriately with their laptops and this and that, and they want that excuse to kind of break that. I think that's why a lot of humor lands at a tech conference that wouldn't otherwise, is because we're all just craving for that. And I think you were both very good at reading that temperature and playing to it at the right moments.
Yeah, you've got to have. And that's what he's saying, like once you've got the content down, then you start delivering it and you start, okay, this is a great place to throw in some punchy statement that will make people laugh and kind of relax a little, and they'll dial in and pay attention. And those are the little techniques. That's the craft of it, right? That's where you start to put that in. Yeah.
I've had a lot of takeaways this week and things, as we go through, sometimes relearning the same concepts at a later point with a different perspective, it hits different. And I have a ton of those. And in this conversation alone, there's so many things we can take with us. And it's not the kind of thing that you can just, he told me how to do storytelling. It's done. It's part of the journey. You can keep addressing these things and growing and getting to the point where you can present as you all can, where it seems flawless and perfect and out of this world. But the truth is, you guys have both revealed a little bit behind the scenes. A lot of repetition has gone in that. Yeah. You've put in the reps. It's not magic. You didn't wake up like that.
Yeah, I can teach you how to hit a baseball. Right? Here's how you hold the bat, and then you're going to do this, and then you can repeat it back, and you sound like frickin' Mickey Mantle. Then get in the batter's box. Very different thing. You just got to do it, right? And then you begin to develop that feel, like, here's a fastball. Okay, here's where my audience is. Like, okay, that didn't land. Why didn't that land?
Yep.
What does that mean? How do I have to change? How do I have to adjust?
I think that sort of also plays along with your career, and as you grow as a professional, you try new things. Oh, wow, putting myself out there and speaking up in that meeting, taking that chance really led to a productive conversation. You kind of build that and go forward. I love drawing parallels because I find that things that are true in one domain apply to everything. Like what you're talking about by focusing on the talk, not the content, but the actual delivery, and sort of creating that space. And Don, you talked about in your talk, you were talking about leadership kind of stuff, and you were talking about creating safety for your employees. And something, in the PowerShell space I always talk about is creating safety for yourself to learn. Don't run things in your environment. Have a test thing, and within teams you want that psychological safety as well. But I want to speak to you as a leader in learning from the community. You talked about in your talk how you grew PowerShell Summit and all the things you've done in the PowerShell world. And now you've kind of leveraged that to move into the leadership space on an executive level. How has that process been? How deliberate have you had to be to make that happen? Or did you stumble upon it?
Oh, no, it was extremely deliberate. I think what a lot of folks don't know, and I really think they should, is that you don't glide from any job into management, right? If you used to be a software engineer, network engineer, whatever, and you're like, I think I want to get into management. First of all, you need to question your motives. If it's just for the money, don't, because you won't enjoy it. But it's a different job. Like, you are a career changer. And whether you know that or not, you are a career changer. And many of the skills you used to have will no longer work. Like, you've got to persuade people. You can't just—
You mean career changer for yourself or for other people?
For yourself.
And for other people.
I thought you can be a multiplier, yeah. I mean, but you can't just type a command into a computer and into a person like you can a computer, right? So it's an entirely different skill set. It was extremely, extremely deliberate. I looked at where I was. I looked at where I needed to be. The clearest path to get from point A to point B was going into leadership. I had a lot of missing bits that I needed to fill in, and so I had to make a plan for how I was going to fill them in. I mean, it was a very, very engineered process.
In addition to storytelling, analogies is very important. I've seen you use it to great effect. Could you give us an analogy to what you just spoke to?
You mean about the leadership business?
Car, GPS?
Oh, yeah. So I think a lot of people, we all have GPSs in our cars. I think a lot of people will climb behind the wheel and you can just drive. Like, as your career, you're not managing it. You're not going anywhere. You're just driving along and it's, oh, look, that looks like a fun roadside stop. Let's go there and see if that works out and if I feel better about it. And I did that for a long time. I mean, that was the book thing. Like I said, I was writing about everything someone would pay me for because my only goal was to get paid. But I wasn't going to go anywhere. Like, my career was never going to solidify into a career that had some synergy that took me places until I sat down and said, okay, look, the people who are doing well clearly have a brand. They're known for a thing. I need to sit down and punch that in. I'm going to be known for this. That's the destination that goes into my GPS. And then I start getting a route. Okay, first thing, I need to write a book about it. Second thing, I need to start booking conferences. Third thing, I need to start offering classes. Like each one leads to the next thing. And then boom, like I was there. If you wanted to learn VB script, you called me. Almost nobody else. I owned that entire market. And then when PowerShell came along, I'm like, clearly I'm out of a job unless I do the same thing over here. I made damn sure I wrote the first book. Right? There was a process to it. It was the same thing with moving into leadership. I need a certain amount of money in my investment account so I can eventually retire, so my family can be taken care of. The best way for me to do that with the skills I've got is to work with tech companies who are near IPO, because then I can get some equity going. I can start building up my investment accounts. And I mean, I'm not going to get 8 figures out of any of this, but if I do enough of them, okay, what do I need to do that? That's my destination. Now let's figure out the route. What roads are going to take me there? And I don't need to figure out the whole route, but I need the first 2-3 steps, and then we'll see what the next one is.
I see a lot of people that feel aimless, and it oftentimes is because they are sort of aimless. And sometimes they'll stumble upon a great opportunity and it'll work for them, but there isn't that greater picture long term. And with my little journey I've been on, I had that sort of longer term picture. When you're thinking about doing your community contributions and getting involved, that first blog post, that first contribution is part of that journey. Mm-hmm. It is that absolute necessary first step. You can make it as small as you want, a super simple post, whatever it is. But that's the sort of catalyst you can build upon from there. And it has to be part of the story. There's going to be challenges and ups and downs guaranteed. So when you hit those downs, just know that that's part of the, whenever you're on the story, whenever you're on here talking about the bad stories, those are the great memories in a certain way once you've kind of gone through it and it's in perspective, and you can write books about it and talk about it years later and see the impact so far down the road. It's so cool that we can have these careers where we can take care of ourselves, where we can be focused on helping others, and along the way help ourselves in a pretty major way. And I guess
it's one of the magic things about the tech industry.
Yeah.
Prior to the great tech revolution, if you wanted to really change your life, you had to invent a machine or build a factory, or like it was hard, right? Like if you look at the titans of industry, they had to have capital. They had to make a thing. Ford had to make a car. You had to make a lot of cars. But in tech, we essentially create value out of thin air.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And you can do it anywhere in the world that has electricity and an internet connection. And you don't have to have a college education, like almost no capital. The only capital you need is like a cheap laptop. And the barriers are so low from a capital perspective, where the barriers are high is from a knowledge perspective. And that's where we can help each other out, because knowledge is easily transferred. And you can absolutely change the course of somebody's life in 100 different ways for the better by giving them some knowledge and then an opportunity.
And it feels like you were listening to my conversation I had just before I walked in here.
Well, you are bugged at all times. You know that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. But I was pointing out that indeed, at no point in time has it ever required less capital to start a company. Yeah. People are virtual. All you need is a laptop. Servers, you pay for them by the hour. Yeah. AI can help with a whole bunch of scaffolding. And then even for things like, I got some document. Instead of giving it to a lawyer saying, what the hell does this mean? You can now feed it to AI and say, hey, give me the essence of it. And it's actually getting much better. So, yeah, the ability to, good idea and go.
It's empowering, and it's cool to see it change lives, and it's cool to know that if you want to take advantage of opportunities and own your career, you can make some amazing things happen. But Jeffrey, you highlighted something, and I love hearing it from your perspective because you've really seen it. You did a talk about being successful as an IC, and one of the things that you had was like this graph where it was earlier in your career, technical is the number one important thing. As you become more advanced and move towards things down your career, soft skills becomes increasingly important.
Yep.
So with our audience here, we have some people who are newer to tech. They're learning PowerShell. We have other folks who love PowerShell, been using it forever, and it's sort of that higher stage. And I think it's important that people know that you have to be aware of those skills. You have to develop a certain degree of self-awareness somewhere along the line and be able to hold yourself accountable and hopefully identify other friends and mentors that can help you. Jeffrey, what has been your experience, like maybe learning the hard way or seeing it in other people, of identifying that soft skills are increasingly important as you move forward?
Yeah, so in the talk I gave two examples. One was, I guess only one that's applicable here. That was when my boss said, "Hey, I need more output from you." I said, "Okay." He said, "No, you don't get it." He says, "You're already working your ass off, and if you work harder, you maybe get 10 or 15% more." He said, "I don't want 10 or 15%. I want 10 or 15 times more. In fact, give me 20x more output." I was like, what are you talking about, Tom? He says, "You're a smart guy. Figure it out." And so at that point, I realized, the only way I could possibly give 20x more output was by increasing the output of our organization. And so as soon as you got that in focus, like my job is to be a force multiplier, then all of a sudden the aperture of tools that you have changes, right? Like, how am I going to get these thousands of people to do something? Well, again, storytelling, collaboration. And I'll tell you this, it's not like a light switch, like, "Oh, okay, I got it. Now I do that." No. Like, you now apprentice yourself to that art of amplification. And I will tell you that, that was a long path for me. Honestly, to be completely honest, I wasn't very good at it until I came to Microsoft and worked on Windows. And why is that? Because I would switch my steamroller mode on whenever I could kind of easily connect the dots. Like, we're going to get along, we're going to cooperate, until I can see failure in the path. As soon as I see a path to failure, that's it. Steamroller on. We're going to steamroll you. And often, we're working at these companies. There's such time pressure that path between where you are and failure is very easy for me to connect. And so I stayed in that mode. But when we got to Windows, and it was a 3-year release, right? Then it was like, I don't have to win this week. Like, if I don't win right now, it's not going to be a failure. And in fact, I don't even need to get it resolved this month. I need to get it resolved. I need to ultimately succeed. But then all of a sudden I could invest some time. Like, hey, explain to me what it is you're talking about. Yeah, work on the relationship. Yeah. And so, having that environment where the pressure was off, again, my weakness was, if I saw that there was a path to failure, that's when all my demons would come out. And get an environment where they were able to be held at bay allowed me to then really learn those skills and those techniques.
In the UK, they call it durable skills, which I like a lot better, because those are the skills that get you across the line no matter what job you're in and no matter what job you go into. It's the one set of skills that is applicable to all trades. When I came to the current company, I like it. Yeah. When I came to the current company,
how many people are hiring C programmers these days?
Exactly. Right. The current company. So I think what a lot of people don't necessarily get about senior leadership is our main job is to have really good relationships with each other. Like, my first team, the one I spend most of my time with, is the other VPs in the company. And our job is to figure out the dependencies and the issues and everything else so that our teams can just do their jobs and get stuff done. And, I was talking about this in my session. Our sales team didn't always love when we launched a new product because it created a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of room for it to distract them from what they were already doing. Already very high quotas, already very strong time pressure. But also we have to grow. And so we need other products. And I had to spend a lot of time developing a good working relationship with my peers on the sales team. I'm like, what's the blocker here? Like, what hurts and how can we make it easier? Like, we all acknowledge we have to do these things, but we have to keep doing what we're also doing. So, like, how do we get there emotionally for everybody? How do we bring everyone along for this ride and make it successful? And it was that relationship building, again, a durable skill, being able to compromise. They're like, part of what would help is if you didn't launch a new product every month. I'm like, okay, you know what? That makes sense to me. It's probably real distracting. They're like, it's real distracting. Okay, fine. You know what? Let's bundle them up into quarterly releases and we'll plan them 2 quarters out. And, it'll be a lot less distracting, a little bit of compromise. It meant I didn't have products on the market for as long as I wanted. So we were giving up a little bit of booked revenue, but it was a healthier outcome in the end. So, all those durable skills, they're the only things that grease the wheels between organic life forms.
Yeah, no. What's interesting about this is that, so we say this, it's not just skills. You become a better person.
Yeah.
So what I've found when I'm doing it well is when I, in my head and in my heart, I enter into an engagement and it's like, I want you to succeed. Right now, there's this conflict, but at the end of the day, I want you to succeed. So how can I help you succeed?
Yep.
And how can I help you advance in your career? And, I have things I want to get done too, but, I just genuinely want to help other people succeed. And all of a sudden, becoming a better person, you get better results.
You're 1,000,000% correct. I see so many people in IT kind of suffering in silence in silos. They have these issues with these other departments and they just kind of decide that they're the enemy. No common ground, no connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better to find a job if you have some networking and know some people. And it's also a lot easier to get things done at a job if you know some people and have some networking done. And it's interesting.
By the way, that just happened at work. There was this thing that we're supposed to be done, and then it wasn't done. So that's a big boofarama because we're supposed to do it to the executives. So I raise it up, talk to the leaders, and say, "Hey, what's going on here? Why are these teams not able to get their story together? Right? Do we just need a little bit more time, or is there a disconnect?" And there's blah 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 blah. Let me go back. Does it just need more time, or is there a disconnect? Oh, there's a disconnect. Oh, well, why are we having that conversation? They're like, "Can we have that conversation?" It's like, whatever the conversation is there to have if we're not aligned on it was like who owns what and who should do what and how should the teams be working together. That is the conversation to have.
We actually did some coaching between a couple of our teams, and everybody got along. I mean, there was no strife, but we weren't all rowing in the same direction. Like, we were not making the ship go faster. And so we got together and I said, look, here's the purpose of this session. First of all, we're all going to go around and we're going to tell a little bit about ourselves. We're going to become human beings, not just a Slack handle. I said, and then once we've done that, we're going to get together again tomorrow and we're going to have an airing of grievances. And I will call on you because I've heard it from all of you. And if you don't offer it up, I'm coming after you for it, but we're getting it all out in the air because you think they're blocking and you think they're lazy and they think you're blocking and they think you're late. Like, we just need to get this out because everyone is dealing with different stuff and we're not acknowledging it. Like, our stuff is the only important stuff. They're in our way. That we stop. We're putting up the poll. We're doing the airing of grievances, and it helps. It's super uncomfortable.
The poll, the Festivus poll?
Yeah, the Festivus poll.
I love this guy.
It's super, super uncomfortable. I find myself working for companies that are culturally very non-confrontational. So, Pluralsight was based in Utah. Utah culture is very non-confrontational. My current company is in the UK, very non-confrontational, like 1,000 ways to talk around a problem with beautiful, beautiful accents, but just everywhere around the problem. And sometimes you have to say, look, let's just talk about it bluntly. Let's be really plain. What is pissing you off?
And I think as leadership, that is sort of you have a huge opportunity to influence everyone else's behavior in that regard. You can lead by example. You can model the behavior. I'm curious, though. I think giving direct feedback, I think in our culture we live in, it is not as
it's not loved.
It's not loved, and it's not apparent. People are a lot of times afraid and just smile and give positive feedback. How have you all gone about getting that happening in your lives at work outside of just yourselves?
I insist on a balance. So I think the current company, we call it glows and grows.
Ooh.
Very decorative. The compliment sandwich,
Yep.
right? You can give me 2 compliments if that makes you comfortable, but in between there, like I need a hard truth. I need something that's going to feel uncomfortable to say. It's going to feel uncomfortable to hear. And that's what we need to do. But you can follow right up with another compliment because it'll make you feel better, right? The adrenaline will go down. I insist on a balance. We typically, when we do like a 360 performance review and, you get peers to give feedback, it's 3 questions. What should I start doing? What should I keep doing? And what should I stop doing? And the only incorrect answer is an empty box. Like there has to be something you wish I would quit doing. Now, look, maybe there's a trade-off for me not doing that anymore, right? Like maybe if I'm, you need to stop being so direct. Okay. Well, we're not going to get stuff done as fast, but you know what? If that's the environment, then okay, let's take that on and talk about it. Balance. There has to be balance. You have to insist on it. You have to force it.
And I think it's worth noting that even if you're receptive to feedback, you don't have to necessarily apply every single thing you get. It's okay to...
That's feedback.
Yeah, exactly. So I think sometimes I worry about that of like, oh, I have to change. No, if they know that they're just sharing feedback, you're acknowledging it's their perspective. Nobody's perspective is perfect. We all got to be aware of that. It goes a long way. Jeffrey, what about you? How do you handle that?
Yeah, often, again, start with the heart. Like, before you have the conversation, check in with your heart and make sure that you want that person to be successful as a person and a career, perhaps not in that job, right? Perhaps there's a bad job fit, but that doesn't mean that you wish them ill will, et cetera. You want them to succeed, so you want them to help find the correct job. So again, always sort of start with the heart. And then the second thing I'd say is a great technique is to get into the habit of giving feedback. And in particular, frequent feedback, which means frequent small feedback. And I think I learned this from the Manager Tools podcast. They have this wonderful little format, and it basically says, here you need to learn this format so that you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about it. You just apply the format. It's like, hey, Don, can I give you some feedback? So that's it. Step number one. Can I give you some feedback? You ask permission. Don, can I give you some feedback?
Yeah.
So the question, and then then. When you give a talk and you refer to this, the audience really responds. Therefore, you should do that again. Okay? So now I gave him feedback, right? When these things happen, then here's the outcome. Going forward, the behavior you'd like to see. So again, 4 things. Ask permission, when, conditions, then, outcomes, going forward something. And it's small, and notice I did it as a positive. Having done it as a positive and having had this pattern of this, you then have that as a muscle, right? You did a bicep curl. First time you do a bicep curl, a little awkward, but now you got a bicep curl. Do it again, do it again, do it again. Now, hey, Don, when you do this, now I'm going to give you something where it's not as good and where I'd like you to improve. But all of a sudden, there's some trust developed. Like, oh, okay, this person's helping me. They've said some positive things. I think in their heart. A lot of this has to do with like there was this great engineer. He's a great engineer, not a particularly successful engineer. And the reason was at Microsoft. The reason was he was a brilliant guy. And he would give you feedback, but he gave you feedback and it was really clear, like he was giving you feedback and it wasn't to help you succeed. It was to point out how smart he was and how smarter he was than you were.
And how irritating you were for not being that smart.
Yeah. And it was like, and I said to him, I said, hey, you know what? You can deliver some really hard messages if the person on the other side of the table believes that in your heart you want them to succeed. And that's not the case here. Anyway, so that's the thing. Like, hey, if again in your heart you really want that person to succeed, and then you develop this muscle, then you can start to confront some of the harder issues, and they can be heard.
Now, you all have both had pretty successful careers, and I've seen it firsthand. You get a lot of positive feedback. And you mentioned the compliment sandwich, where those 2 compliments, they may be based in reality, but if you know how people are communicating, you know that maybe it's not the most genuine thing. How do you deal with feedback when you get a lot of good feedback? Do you internalize it every time? Do you just accept, hey, you're doing good work, you're going to get a certain amount of good feedback? Or, how do you navigate that?
I kind of synthesize it. If there's an aggregate, right, like take these 1,800 things, and is there a through line, right? Is that something I'm doing well, or is it something I'm doing poorly, or whatever else? I get pretty self-critical, especially in public speaking. It's really rare for someone to come up to your face and say, boy, that stank.
Exactly. Even if it does.
Yeah. They'll put it on the anonymous form later, and that's fine too. That's really useful. Checking the numbers, not helpful. Doesn't tell me anything. I can't do anything with it. But the comments, by all means. But I get pretty self-critical. It's one of the reasons I can't actually go into public speaking sessions and listen to someone else. Because like the first 5 words out of their mouth I got, and then I start going into judgy mode. And I'm like, oh, they're doing that really well. Look at how they're moving across the stage there. Tap their fingers a lot though. I don't like that. And I've just completely lost the thread of whatever it is I was there to see. I get really, really self-critical. I mean, I post-mortem really hard. I mentally prep. Like I will often wake up several hours early, like I did this morning, and I find that I'm running through my storyline in my head so that it feels smooth and it feels like it's all going to fit together. I'm probably rougher than I need to be, but because I don't get a lot of negative feedback about those things, like books, right? By the time you write a book, you can't do much about it, but you can try harder in the next book. Amazon reviews, not super helpful. So I get really self-critical about, could I have tweaked that a little better? Could I have done that a little better?
Do you think you'd be better off if the world was better at giving that kind of kind, but also constructive feedback?
I mean, maybe. One thing I worry about a little bit is that most human beings don't know how our brains work real well. So, like, if you were to give me really meaningful, constructive feedback, even if it was negative, on, say, a talk I'd given, sometimes people will ask for things that aren't helpful. Like, you could have made that a lot more concise. You could have done that in 30 minutes. Yeah, but your brain wouldn't have got it. Like, I did have to repeat that phrase 4 or 5 times because that's how your brain works. Like, I know it feels really inefficient when you talk about it on paper, but your brain's not very efficient. None of ours are. And so there is yes and no.
I noticed that you have, I don't know if it's pronounced pedagogy or whatever. Basically, pedagogy. Yeah, the study of learning or teaching, rather, right?
Well, I mean, technically it's teaching kids, right? Like pediatrician.
Gotcha.
Andragogy is the overall teaching human beings, although nobody uses that word, so I don't bother. Because I don't have a background in education, I've read a lot of books. A lot of books on cognitive science, a lot of books on effectively teaching adults, which is very different than teaching kids. Like, you can tell a 4th grader you have to memorize your times tables, and the little sucker just has to do it, right? They just have to get it done. Yeah. You tell that to an adult who has a job, they're going to show you the door, right? So it is different. Adults are terrified of failure, and especially in front of peers. I've literally taught classes where, you know how the typical 1 week tech class is, right? You're in the room for a week, a little bit of lecture, and then there's a lab. And someone will go, well, what if I were to run this command in PowerShell? I'm like, it's not even your computer. Try it. Like, the worst that can happen is I have to reset your VM. Come on. Like, well, but it might blow up. It might. That's okay.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
This is why our PowerShell Unplugged sessions were so successful, I believe, because, went out of the way to not have it all
not too scripted
and scripted, and concretely that I made errors, right? And I wasn't making those errors intentionally. I'm truly a crappy typist.
Have you gone back and watched any of those?
I haven't.
Oh, there was one. We were on fire. I don't think anyone learned anything, but it was so entertaining. I think that, did you just lick my cookie comment
yes.
came from? You had been playing around in the ISE and you were messing with the object model, and I think you programmatically bumped the font size to 18 and then back down to 12 or whatever. And then you stepped around to the front of the podium to opine on something. And I went to your computer and I tried to do the same command, but I typoed it. Like, I set the font size to 182 and then I went whoosh. Everyone laughs, but he had just made a joke. And I'm like, that's not what they're laughing at. It wasn't a good joke. Only now I can't see because it only fits 2 letters on the screen. So I'm like, up arrow. Oh God, what did I do? Okay, backspace, 2, enter. And it shrunk back down just as you turned around and said, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing, I'm fine.
And the whole point of that was to show, hey, inventor, PowerShell, technical fellow, makes mistakes all the time, to try and normalize that model. By the way, the worst mistake I ever made, and I don't know if you know, we've got the adaptive type system. And if you do get process and pipe it to get member, you'll see that there are various aliases. And some of those aliases, like company, the object model was funky. And so they put company down a couple levels, right? And so it's like, okay, well, I'll go grab it and bring it up to the top level where you want it. But one of them is a little weird. It's handles, and it maps to handle count. Were you in that one?
No.
Because I was doing a thing, get process, where handle count greater than some number and sort, and I had misspelled handle count and had missed the O, and I didn't realize that. And so people are laughing, and I'm thinking they're laughing at me that I'm an idiot. Yeah, that I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what I'm doing. And then when I saw it, it was like, oh my God.
Can't go back.
There's like 1,000 people in this room. And so then
it's being recorded.
It's being recorded. So then from now on, it's always get process where handles greater than. And you notice handles is plural. We don't do plurals. We do plurals for handle count, and that's why.
We were at Tech Ed one year, and we were doing a session. We had 2 sessions together. And on the first one, I said, I'll just hook my computer up. We can use that. Instead of doing the switching back and forth, it's a pain. Well, I had a Mac. Well, this one doesn't know where any of the buttons are. And he was whining about it the entire time. So we get into the second session. I'm like, we'll use your computer this time. That's fine. So we're going through the whole session, and I'm moving the mouse around, and I'm trying to – he's got one of those arc mice. You remember those?
They're awesome.
Oh, the sideways kind of thing?
No, the whole thing is like an arc.
Oh, no, I don't.
Like an up-down – like a bridge arc.
Okay.
He's going to get one.
Oh, my gosh. He has it on him.
So they collapse down flat. I don't know any of this. I've never seen one of these before. I'm pushing the button. He's like, well, you got to click it. I'm like, I know how to use a mouse. I am clicking. He says, well, click it harder. And I pushed down with my whole hand, and the whole mouse just went into a flat sheet. This is what they look like. And then to turn it on, it's this little arc. So I'm waving the thing around, and I go, oh, I broke Jeffrey Snover's mouse. It became very entertaining from that point, because then I'm typing, and I think I hit the Windows button, and Windows 8 had just come out. And so the whole start screen comes up. I'm like, well, I don't know how to get back.
And again,
it's okay to make those mistakes, though.
It's okay to make those
fun.
mistakes.
It's fine.
You're people that are, people are looking up to, like, oh, and it's like, yeah, we're just screw ups.
Yeah, we're just a couple of stooges, and we can't even operate a mouse.
Yeah.
Earlier you talked about sort of personal growth and all this kind of thing. And for me, that demonstration of being an actual human and not having to be super polished and, hey, I'm the top of the world, this and that was transformative for me to be able to see, like, I can actually be one of these people who's doing the stuff that I'm looking up to eventually. Like,
exactly.
They actually are just kind of like.
Because I don't know about you, I would see these keynotes, and Rasinovich or Scott would be up there, and they'd like click, 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 and look, 3 seconds later, I've got this amazing thing. It's like, wow, the technology's so easy. And then I'd like, what? And I was like, I'm a freaking moron. I mean, they did it in like 5 seconds. I'm here an hour later. I can't get anything working. I'm an idiot. It's like, no.
I was so, especially when I was doing stuff. I did a session one time where I showed somebody how to install and administer all 10 Microsoft.NET Enterprise Server products. I was definitely not overreaching. It was like a 2-hour session. And we called it Julia Childing, the demo, right? Because on all the old cooking shows, it's you mix everything, and she bends down and puts it in the oven, and instantaneously comes out with it. We would do that a lot, just to save time, right? Because I can't sit here and let the VM spin for 20 hours while it installs SQL Server. It's very polished, but it's also not very real. It sets a bad expectation, I think.
It really does. I had a transformative experience whenever I first mentored with somebody in the PowerShell community. I got to see their screen and actually see what a real human typing interactively looked, and could ask questions and things like that, and see the keyboard shortcuts that they use to navigate and go faster. I think just keeping it real is just so important, though. And I think as people contribute out there, they can hold that with them. You don't need to be a fully polished up, perfect person who knows everything about PowerShell. You can get in where you fit in. You can embrace. If you make a mistake on stage, you've maybe opened up the door for someone else to be like, holy crap, they survived that. They're totally fine. They're back next year. I guess I could maybe do it. If things go bad, it's all good.
I definitely had some epic failures.
You want to share a story?
Epic. Well, it's again, when you're doing these multiple VM, I think I was teaching System Center, right? So like you have to have multiple computers or there's really no point. And you can get it down to maybe 5 or 6, but that's still a lot for one machine on a podium to churn away at. And it finally just ground to a halt. And everything is sitting there, and it was probably, swap filing to death. And the processor was probably deadlocked in 4 different directions. And someone's like, well, I guess it's over. I'm like, oh, no. I videoed this at home. We're just going to play the video now.
Backup plan.
Yeah. So were you in the audience when, I think it was Barcelona, where I was pointing out how, you have this amazing what if and minus confirm on all your commands that you have anything that has a side effect could be deleterious. You type one of those. And so I was pointing out like, well, we also have this amazing capability, which is, regular expressions, right? So look here, I can do get process with this regular expression, this crazy thing, and I pipe it to stop process. And is that a good thing or not? And I hit return without adding the minus what if or confirm. And what that thing.
Wonk.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of those things was LSASS, which, by the way.
That'll blue screen Windows.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's not good. It was back in the day where you had hard drives and it took a long time to start your machine. So it's like, let me explain some things.
I was doing a class for a bank one time. We shall not name the bank. But I was in a Midwestern city, and we were getting into Active Directory, and I'm like, so look, here's the thing we're going to do. For example, posit, what if you did get AD user pipe, remove AD user? They're like, oh, that would get all the users removal. I'm like, fine, we're not going to type that. But go ahead and run get AD user. So they run it, and I said, okay, how many users came back? Because it's like 3 or 4 usually, right, on a fresh domain. They're like, oh, it's still running. I'm like, our VM's a little underpowered. They're like, well, no, we have like 60,000 user accounts. I'm like, what are you typing on there? Oh, we're each RDP'd into a domain controller. Like, cool. Everyone stop. Please take your hands off the keyboard. Stand up. I am going to go transfer all of my money out of this bank. And you are going to go explain to me why we're running on your production domain controllers. Oh, my God.
I remember you were the one who said if you're running tests on your production system, you don't have a production system.
Yeah.
If you don't have a test AD, you don't have a production AD. What the hell did you say? It's so good.
If you don't have a test domain, you don't have a production domain. You just have a test domain.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are, thinking back on the legacy of all these years over the time, there's been different phrases and things that have been consistent over the years. I think you mentioned every single time you use right host, God kills a puppy. What are some of your favorites sort of over the years that you found that like kind of resonate, kind of shake things up, get people thinking?
I like that one because when I would do it in a class, I would tell people, now look, here's a really important tip. In fact, get your pens out and write this down. Write every time, and I'm watching them write it. Keep writing, okay. Every time you use right host, God kills a puppy, and they all stop. I'm like, all right, now let me explain why. You just stopped. I like that one. I've probably forgotten.
That's probably pretty legendary. I mean,
that one.
That was.
Learn PowerShell or learn to say, would you like fries with that?
Yeah, that was a great one.
Right. We had to pull that out in the early days. In fact, that was my first Tech Ed session was Tech Ed US 2007. It was after PowerShell had launched in Barcelona. And he was supposed to be giving the talk, but got cross-scheduled somewhere. You had to be at a customer. And they asked, would you like to give the talk? I'm like, yes, please. I would like to give the talk. Thank you very much. And then the Tech Ed people called me and they said, so we have you in the biggest room. It's 5,000 people and it's oversubscribed. Do you mind if we book a repeat? I'm like, yes, please. I would love the repeat. Thank you. And then we're oversubscribed. Would you mind if we live stream this on live meeting? Okay. So I get in and it's lights and a 3-point camera shot. And anytime I do a demo, I have to announce it because they have to start the live meeting thing. And it's all just logistical hell. And I'm sweating 20 minutes before it even begins. And then this one walks in. I'm like, what are you doing here? He says, PowerShell's getting an award, so they rescheduled me. And he plops down in the front row next to Chris. I'm like, okay. I have rehearsed this session to within an inch of its and my life. Like learn PowerShell or learn to say, would you like fries with that? And he immediately leans over to Chris. I'm like, uh-oh, that's bad. Uh-oh. So now I'm sweating even more, and I'm on, like you said, when you do something enough, I'm on muscle memory. The words are coming. I'm telling the jokes. People are doing the laughing. I'm doing the demos, everything else. And these two, the whole time, I'm like, well, I enjoyed the 3 years I was an MVP. It is sad that it is over again, but at least I got to do, this. I'll take a picture and, oh, well, whatever. What finishes, he walks up, good talk, turns around, marches out. I'm like, yep, I'm dead. I should probably learn Linux. Chris helps me pack up. I'm shaking like a leaf in the wind. And we get out. I'm like, what do you say? Chris says, well, when you did that French fry joke, he said, I'm really glad Don's up there because that needed to be said and I couldn't say it. I'm like, what was the rest of it? Oh, we just realized it was making you nervous. Yeah. Yeah. So the fry remark, definitely.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
It still kind of hits. It still kind of resonates.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a foregone conclusion now, but
Yeah.
Well, it really was the case that, a lot of Windows administration was the ability to pay minimum wage to someone who would click next.
a button monkey.
Yeah. Just click next and then finish. And if that's all you do,
Yeah. Like, where's your real value?
yeah, what's the point of that?
No forward mobility there.
You had the one saying, people who don't patch Windows is like the guy who jumps out of a skyscraper and halfway down says, "So far, so good."
There you go. Yeah.
How do you come up with that? Does that just you're reading a lot, you're kind of seeing things, or how does that come to your head?
No, I just have a strange mind.
Yeah. Most of my zingers have just come to me. They don't all work. Like I definitely had at least one notable one that as soon as I said it, I'm like, oh, that was bad.
What's that one I had about Agile? Agile was all the rage, right? And I was like, yeah, Agile is like peeing in your pants. At first, it's pretty cool. It's warm and comfortable. Later come the consequences.
That's good.
Yeah, that one was awkward. That worked. It worked. The SSH one, that was awkward, but it worked.
SSH one, yeah.
What was SSH one?
SSH is like a San Francisco bathhouse. There's too much anonymous sharing.
True.
Because we all misuse SSH, right?
Right.
Like,
And it was an open source community of people just putting in code and like, and now I'm going to run admin privileges with this code that came from where? From
Yep.
what? And you're betting your business on it? Hey, you know what? The WinRM, throw rocks at it. But I tell you what, I'm putting my badge on the table. It says it's safe, it's secure.
my legendary awkward one was when it was about remoting. Because I was trying to do like a before and after, right? Like, how did we manage computers before? Well, it was all distributed comm, so it's all RPCs, remote procedure calls. I said, you guys know how remote procedure calls are to get through a firewall. Oh, everyone going like, yeah, it's trying to like shove a baby through cheesecloth. It's ugly and nobody wants to do it.
That was bad.
Helmick is down in the front row. He's like, nope, shaking his head. He's like, nope, not that one. And I'm like, yeah, nope, as soon as I heard it. But it just like came to me and it went through my head real fast. I'm like, nope, can't put a puppy through cheesecloth because God killed the puppies. I don't like cats. Then I ran out of time. My mouth caught up. And I just said baby. I'm like, oh, yep, nope, that was a bad one.
That was a bad one.
You learn.
That's what happens, when you have creativity, sometimes it goes pear-shaped. And it's not evilness, etc. That's why I feel bad for these comedians that get canceled.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and it's the creativity and the time pressure.
Yeah.
And you're full of adrenaline.
Yep.
Like when you're up on stage and you are laying it down, like after I had been speaking at conferences for 5 or 6 years, because you have to put so much out. I went back and tried to teach a 1 week just normal class to 10 people, and I'd almost died because I'd forgotten how to dial it down.
Yeah.
And you can't, the human body cannot be full of adrenaline for 6 hours. It's not okay.
Yeah, I remember doing these talks and then going back to the green room and just like collapsing. Oh my God.
You could go to almost any speaker lounge and there's just a bunch of zombies staring off into the distance.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not that we don't want the attendees to come in. It's like we need a minute.
And it was chemical. It's just like this, like, holy schmoly, what was that?
Yep. You got to hydrate and stop shaking. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that I find myself in that spot. I'm like, okay, let's try and breathe and bring it back down, and then I'll slip into it again. And the juggling act of life, for me at least. But I want to look back because I have both of you here. We have this a lot of highs, hopefully less lows. What is your favorite part of the PowerShell journey for you? When was an impactful moment where you're like, holy crap, this is something? Maybe it changed your life. Maybe there was rippling effects there, or what was that for you?
This one's very easy for me. No, I screwed that up.
Yeah, no.
There's a couple that I think I really screwed up.
That was a low.
No, it was a Florida conference, and it was a representative of something that happened a lot. The number of people that came up and tell me their stories. And this guy came up and he said, and it was oddly enough, so many people had told me about they got a promotion, they got a raise, and the number of people that told me that they doubled. But the number of people that told me that they had tripled their salary was odd. There was a couple quadruples, not many, but the number of triples was very large. Anyway, so this guy was one of those, and he's like, hey, just want you to know that, this transformed my life. I got promotion. I was the hero of my company. My salary has tripled. He says, we were able to buy a house. And I never in my dream ever thought we could buy a house. And this fall, for the first time in our family's history, my daughter is going to be going to college. And it's all because of this technology. And boy, that really just, that was representative of a large number of people that had done that. And again, I said it in my talk today, PowerShell is, and always will be about the user community. Like, how can we make you successful? People would say, oh, PowerShell versus X. I said, dude, whatever tool makes you successful, that's the tool you should use. So it's never about the tool. It's about making people successful. And that was just a moment that brought that such clarity, really. There was a lot of sacrifices to get PowerShell out. There's a lot of pain. Oh my God, a lot of pain getting PowerShell out. But to have some moments like that, to realize that all that pain turned into this swath of people being able to transform their careers and, in some cases, their lives, that was just fantastic.
It's a pretty good one. Hard to not just use the same thing, but
it is. It is the same. It's from a different angle, though. Like, we talked before about how tech can be so empowering and the barriers are so low. But there are barriers, right? PowerShell represented and represents an opportunity for a lot of people. I've had, folks who said, look, our manager believes in this. He's been to your talks. We were just told that we have to reapply for a new job and we're not all going to make it. And it's going to be based on our ability to automate. And we're going to get paid twice as much, but there's only going to be a third as many of us. I'm like, well, that's bold. But the opportunity you can only take advantage of the opportunity if you have the knowledge. And so when people come up and say, look, I had this huge opportunity, and because of your book, I knew how to take advantage of it, right? I knew how to use this thing. I was ready. No one else on the team was ready. And I was just talking to a fellow out here. He's a DevOps engineer, and they made the role up for him inside his company. Wow. He used to be the PowerShell guy. And he's like, we can really use this for a lot more stuff. And they're like, yeah, you know what? We can. It's impossible to not be just thrilled when something like that happens. There were a lot of smaller, I think, really bright moments. Right as Bill Gates was retiring, he agreed to come talk to the MVP Summit that year, which was kind of cool. Legit.
Billy G in the house. Pretty
and
good.
He took some questions. So it was so unhinged, his talk. When did he retire?
I don't know.
Video on the internet is going to be amazing. And he talked about how amazing video was and how on the internet video is just amazing for 10 minutes. And I'm like, did anyone prep you at all for this? Are you okay? Blink twice if you need help. And he said, and I'm going to take a few questions. I'm like, nope, that's a bad idea. Not from this crowd. I wouldn't take questions from this crowd. Take a question from my mom. Well, as it turns out, he did both, because the first question, I swear, hand to God, a Microsoft most valuable professional stands up at a microphone and asks Bill Gates why his Outlook doesn't work as well. And we're all like, Bill Gates doesn't even use Outlook. He pays people to use Outlook for him.
Yeah.
And they saved, I think they screened a couple people before they let the next guy up. He had an original copy of the Altair Basic Manual and wanted to know if Bill would autograph it. And Bill's like, absolutely. Brought it up, and they're like, get Bill the hell out of here. So there are tons of bright moments that I only got to access because, I was involved in the way that I was involved, and because PowerShell was on the trajectory that it was on. But at the end of the day, those are all personal wins. The thing that really makes me love this event, love the community, everything else is that, when someone comes up and says, hey, your book helped, it's, there was a lady who walked up, because, I had some of my novels. She walked up and she says, oh, I loved this book. It's called The Never. Wow. And I said, oh, well, thank you so much. She said, oh no, it's better. I didn't know you wrote it.
Wow.
She said, I was putting it in my story graph. She's like, Don Jones? It can't be the same Don Jones. He writes computer books. But it was. I'm like, oh my God, thank you.
That is so full circle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it's like when your work meant something, even if it was just entertainment, that just, it's a ton. It means
awesome.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that It's awesome to see that huge scale stuff, but I think it's important people take note. If you're impacting just one person,
that's all that matters.
Ride that high. Enjoy it.
Yeah. It could be your own kid.
Yeah. I think a lot of times with this work stuff, it is very helpful, and the biggest impact we can make is in our communities and in our families. That's the most kind of direct, immediate way. And then from there out, trying to find ways to be a force multiplier for others. But I want to say thank you to both of you. You mentioned PowerShell changing your life. Early on in my career, I was like, okay, IT is that place where, I'm going to get an IT, I'm getting like $30,000 a year, and then eventually I'll learn how to code and make six figures. And I didn't know about PowerShell at the time, but I knew that was a thing. Like, you could learn to code. And then eventually went on the journey, and I appreciate it so much. I think so many others can have similar experiences where PowerShell has transformed their life. I think we're amongst them this week and in the community at large.
We had the same experience. I mean, PowerShell obviously changed my career pretty substantially. Yeah. But, every time I convinced another person to use PowerShell and taught them how to use it, it gave Jeffrey a little more clout, right? Like, it just proved that he got it right. And in a company like Microsoft, when you get it right, you're going to get a lot more opportunities to be right again. And it was a feedback loop. It really was. I mean, everybody on the PowerShell team is very much responsible for all of their successes jointly, right? It all moved forward. And the community in a lot of ways was just an extension of that team. We didn't have blue badges, but it was that virtuous cycle. The team listened a lot. They synthesized a lot of input. They tried their best to pick a path down the middle in most cases where they were pleasing as many people as they could. And because they did that, more people would use it and more people would give the feedback. And the rising tide lifts all boats. And it was a big tide. So and a lot of boats went up.
I think there's the next generation of community leaders listening. And what's a message you would have for them?
Do it. Get in and don't be effing lazy. Do it. Do the work. Put on a PowerShell Saturday. Like, if you want nice things, be willing to do them yourself and show other people how they're done. My proudest moment, sad moment, bittersweet moment was when I stepped away from this conference in 2019 because it was going to continue without me. And that meant I built something that was worthy because other people saw the worth in it and they were willing to do the work to keep it going. Do that. Do the work.
That's a great point. Yeah, I remember seeing you do that and learning from that experience and doing that in my own little way at work. I was going to eventually move on and decided to create things in a way where my scripts aren't going to just stop running when I leave. Train the people, pass it on to the next generation and keep things going. Otherwise, all the lessons and strife and time you put into it, it's just going to be lost on you.
It's lost.
Yeah. And some of us have too much blood, sweat, and tears in the game to just let it go.
Yeah.
Not very efficient. What about you, Jeffrey? What do you have for the next generation?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, share, right? By sharing, at some point we figured out that the GUI, the mouse, this was the destroyer of joy. Yeah. And so what do I mean? So at some point we were like, oh, hey, have you seen what Bruce has done? And we all go running into Bruce's office and see how he had done a particular script. It's like, dang, that is cool. He's awesome. And then steal that, et cetera, and realize, when was the last time you said, oh, hey, let's run into Don's box. Have you seen the way he clicked that mouse? Look at this. Look, right there. And he put it over the button and then he clicked. Wow, I wish I could do that. Like, it just doesn't happen, right? There's no joy. And we realized that the GUI was antisocial, right? That you, having completed a task with the GUI and a mouse, have nothing. Right? I have a problem. You cannot help me. If you want to help me, what do you do? Remember those installation guides that were like 100 pages and they were all like screen captures and there's a mouse button and you click here and then click here and then click here. 100 pages of this crap, right? Like that's what sharing was, right? Whereas with a script, you have something that's shareable. Right? And it's valuable. You've created something and you can give it to someone and a couple things happen. Number one is they benefit from it. And so now a debt of gratitude is incurred, right? You go to a show, they buy you a cup of coffee, they buy you a beer. They might take your script and then say, hey, why did you do it this way? Had you considered doing it this way? And so now all of a sudden there's a reverse flow of value. They've taught you something. A number of times that has happened to me is quite large, right? Hey, Jeffrey, why'd you write that crappy script? Why didn't you do it this way? It's like, oh, I didn't think about that. And so, step by step, by sharing, you make the world better and you make yourself better. And then that's just a loop. Do it more and more and more. And it is one of those things, again, just the more you give, the more you will get. You benefit from your reputation rises. Like, oh, hey, have we ever talked about that person that never shared a script? No, we don't talk about that person. Never. But when we see someone who's shared something, we talk about them. They exist. They get invited to conferences, to give talks, and it just grows.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. This chat has been, we've gone some directions. I have a lot of personal action items. I think a lot of people out there have taken a lot away. Thank you all for your contributions over the years. Words can't really put it into a fair way of viewing it. So thank you both so much.
Yeah, thanks you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.